The earnings call is coming up tomorrow, as of when this comes out anyway. And there are a bunch of great investor questions and some not so great investor questions on Say Technologies. So we're going to go over them. I am joined today by Matt Smith of Rebellionaire, and he might have an answer or two. We'll find out. I'm Brian. Welcome to My Tesla Weekend. Matt, so good of you to join us. Thank you. How have you been?
Thanks, Brian. I've been doing well. I can't remember the last time I've been on here, but it's been too
A
long.
while.
So
It's
let's
been a while.
try not to let it go so long again. But yeah, thanks for having me on. I certainly don't have the answers, but I'll share my thoughts and maybe even beyond that, maybe what I think Elon might be likely to be thinking or saying about some of this stuff, and we can just get into it.
A lot of the questions can't be answered on an earnings call, and we'll address that as well. So looking
Typical.
at them, typical, looking at them here, we'll start right at the top. And the idea is anyone with shares can register their shares and then be able to ask questions, vote on other questions, and whatnot. There's a limit to how it works. If it's important to you, go check it out. Given that you moved the start of the next gen compact vehicle to Austin, has the timeline improved so we might see next gen in 2025? Do you think that will be answered?
No, I don't.
No, I
I
don't.
think they're going to want to do a product unveil at some point, and they're going to want to do that not on an earnings call, and they're not going to want to share any details about Gen 3 until that product unveil has really happened. I mean, this one is, I mean, it just seems really obvious as an investor. You don't want them to Osborne their own products. Like if they were to say like, oh my gosh, this car is amazing, and we're going to get it for $25,000, and we actually hope to ship it like in early 2025. Obviously, customers may delay purchasing a Model 3 or a Model Y right now. So that's a very obvious
Yeah.
reason we're not going to get an answer on this one.
What has been the barrier to ramping 4680s?
It's hard. Yeah, I mean, I do hope that maybe Drew Baglino will go into a little bit of detail about maybe what are some of the actual roadblocks that they've run into in the past. I mean, that is something that he has shared some information on of like, I think in one earnings call it might have even been where he was talking about like how the rollers when they were doing them on the pilot lines or in the small scale it worked fine, but then he ran into issues at a larger scale. So maybe he shares some details like that. I think that'll be interesting and maybe not material to the stock. But I think any kind of indication they can give on how that ramp rate is going might be some useful information. And they may actually share that. I mean, this is one where we could actually get an answer, I think.
I would agree with you on all points, and it is a very important question. What's your expectation for auto gross margins ex credit for the full year?
This one's interesting. I feel like I might have had a better grasp for how this might have been answered with Zach Kirkhorn and the CFO role. But this is what I think it's only the second quarter with the new CFO on the earnings call. So I just don't have a feel for how forthcoming or not we may be on this front. My sense is they can't answer this question even if they wanted to, because demand plays such a big role in this. What's going to happen with interest rates? Do they need more price cuts? Because that was Zach Kirkhorn gave us guidance like almost exactly 12 months ago, which they then proceeded to miss the next quarter. So even if we did get an answer here, I struggle to really understand or really put too much weight into it because I think the track record is just not very strong here.
We're 3 weeks into the year, guys. Give him some breathing room.
This
Uh,
and like talk about like the perfect example of a question Elon hates. Like I'm trying to hone in my model for Tesla's EPS, for full year like 2024. Elon, like tell me your thoughts about that. Like Elon will basically just tell you to like F off and like invest in the company for the products, not because of what we're going to do in earnings this year. For better or worse, that's kind of his attitude for this sort of thing.
the earnings we expect will be strong.
Yeah, and it doesn't really matter because autonomy is coming and like the full value is going to be on the back end, so we can sell the cars as zero. Like we've heard Elon kind of do that whole thing before. So like he's got a point. Like they technically could sell the cars for zero margin and make it all up on the back end. It's just like that's a risky strategy.
Yeah. And then you've got FSD licensing may be imminent in China. If that happens, that's a whole bunch of not licensing, but approval,
Yeah,
regulatory
approval.
approval that would open some new revenue opportunities that are not currently reflected.
Yeah, and in Europe too, I would add. I mean, as early as June 1st is what Florian Minderop, who operates the Mr. Green robotaxi, or not robotaxi, they want to be a robotaxi company eventually, but they've got a fleet of, I think it's around 5,000 Teslas right now, so they're watching that regulation very closely. They're saying it's as soon as June. I've seen some commentary basically saying it's either, if not June of this year, then January 1st of next year would be when it would be most likely approved. But either way, it seems like the days where FSD is like severely neutered in the non-North American markets might be coming to an end.
And even if the take rate is quite low, that is still a mountain of cash that was not available yesterday.
I was just going to say, and the take rate's already so low. So I mean, if it goes from, let's call it 8-9% global right now, and the majority of that's the U.S. So even if you get, I don't know, 5 to 10% take rate in those other geographies, that's a massive change in your overall global take rate. If you
Yeah,
just look at the breakdown of the weighted average sales between US and Europe and China.
for
So
sure.
big
Does the
opportunity.
does the company anticipate 50% compound growth to be realized this year or next year? So we know the answer for 24 is no.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
I feel like this one they've already answered so many times. It doesn't matter in any given year. We also know he's talked about this being like a long-term growth rate from, I forget when he said when it was started, but basically that's like the number to get to 20 million units in 2030. But as they've said many times, we're kind of in between the Model 3 and Model Y ramp, but before Gen 3. So this is a little bit of a softer year, and so like definitely not in
Right.
2024.
If you had modest growth in 3S, X, and Y, and then you would need a million Cybertrucks to hit it this year. I do not anticipate a million Cybertrucks this year.
I,
I
that's
think
a
I
that's a
think that
reasonable
number's
bet.
a little
Yeah.
high. So, and in 25, let's wait and see what the factories do. We'll get back on track with the compact. Fingers crossed. When will Tesla start on Giga Nevada expansion? Irrelevant. We just saw it. The groundbreaking probably happened after this question was asked.
Yeah.
Unless, yeah.
It was last week, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. When should retail shareholders be concerned that Elon has stated he's uncomfortable if he doesn't have 25% of the
What
voting power?
what I want to know, like, what do people expect Elon to say? Like, yeah, you should be uncomfortable. Like what
Right?
are you looking for when you ask this question? Like, ask your
3.4 million
therapist that
shares.
question.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, can you speak to my emotional state? What? I
Yeah.
can't. I'm not qualified. It
Yeah.
would seem that a new comp plan is something that's already being discussed. And as soon as the Delaware case is resolved, they can move forward with that. But until then, it's a bit premature. From what I understand. So, not the biggest concern. How many Cybertruck orders in the queue? And do you expect, when do you anticipate to get through the entire backlog of existing orders?
I mean, that's another one where there are so many unknowns in that like an answer would be like just worthless. Um, I mean, not the smallest question of which is what percent of those orders, which you can plop down for $100, are going to actually convert to like actual deliveries. I, for example, have 21 orders still out there, which was essentially a free call option on the autonomy play. So if I can use those as like robo taxis, then I would actually take delivery of them, probably of all of them, but I don't know. I'd have to figure that out. But Elon does not have, even though he's got great data, he doesn't have any type of data that would give him an answer of what percentage of those will convert. And even if he did, then you've got to match that up with the extrapolation of the production ramp, which, as we know, is like an impossible thing to do. So
Agree on
let's
all
just say
points.
Cybertruck demand is strong, and it legitimately is a supply issue, not a demand issue right now.
Absolutely agree on all points. I would add that the number is especially meaningless because we know that the existing orders, not all of them will fill, and we know that new orders are coming in the meantime. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, can we get Tesla energy volumes reported in the in the statement.
Yeah, so I kind of was going back and forth on this. My gut reaction was like, it doesn't really matter, first of all, because it's small relative to, 3 and Y. And I mean, I guess maybe if you look at the gross margin impact, maybe it's comparable to like S and X, and roughly that same kind of order of magnitude of how does it impact gross margin. So maybe eventually it kind of makes sense to go there. But even then, I think it can be extremely misleading because the the revenue recognition is not tied directly to the deliveries or the deployments, as they're called in the quarterly letters, because like there's all these different milestones of revenue recognition, and so it's going to be a little bit lumpy. So you might have some quarter where you've got like a massive uptick in volumes, but the revenue and the margin doesn't show up just because of the accounting that
Right.
goes into this. So I do think it
Yeah.
could potentially get expectations out of whack a little bit.
Well, these are very big projects with very big price tags. And like you said, until it's scaled, even once it's scaled, we're going to see lumpy financials because you might have $500 million in inventory out with invoices outstanding that will be paid shortly. Kind of late in the video, but I should mention your credentials a little bit. Matt is you were with Good Soil Investments. You're now with Rebellionaire. Tell us real quick about your work, your experience, all that, and why we're listening to you today.
Uh, well, so yeah, my background's in finance and energy. I actually spent 7 years in the energy sector, so I've got a little bit of kind of knowledge of mega packs and kind of the value proposition there. But yeah, like you said, worked with Emmett at Good Soil for a couple of years. Now I'm with Bradford Ferguson at Rebellionaire. So essentially, what we're trying to do is help people, many of which are all in on Tesla or otherwise have a very significant concentration in Tesla, but want to work with a financial advisor of some type. So we are a registered investment advisor. None of this is financial advice, but I am a financial advisor, and anyone who is kind of interested in what we're doing and is actually looking for a financial advisor who's not going to laugh at them when they see their brokerage statement and you're like 95% Tesla. A lot of the people watching your channel, I'd imagine, Brian, are kind of in that category. I think what Bradford and I are trying to do is to kind of fill that void of people who want financial services and a financial plan, but without getting mocked or laughed at because of their conviction on Tesla or any other name for that matter.
And I should mention, in full disclosure, I am a member of the Rebellionaire group on X, but I apart from that giving me a little badge by my name, I don't have any professional relationship with you or Bradford. Apart from Bradford does subscribe to me on X, which is like $5 a month. So I don't think that introduces undue influence, but I figured I'd
Yeah,
mention it.
I don't think so, but maybe for people who are just not aware, because a lot of people probably see the badges on X for some of these people, and really what we're trying to do there, and Bradford's been doing a great job of leading this, is just people who are putting out great content. We want to support them and give them better reach. So obviously we've done that with you, and there's several others, and Bradford I think has always been very supportive of like kind of the independent analysts and researchers out there who are just putting out good content. And so that's what we want to do is try to amplify those voices to the extent we can. But yeah, it's not, we're not getting any like, I would say there's no
Yeah.
meaningful financial relationship between Rebellionaire and My Tesla Weekend other than just generally supporting what you're doing.
Well, that $5 a month, man, I'm gonna go maybe get most of a coffee with it. Uh, but yeah, I just wanted to make sure we got your background covered and all that. What is the timeline for Optimus' first production of off volume line, and what are the barriers to getting there? Come on.
That one should go back to get some proofreading, I think, before we get some votes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. I don't mind this question honestly. Again, I'm not super sure that they'll answer it, but I think what I'm maybe more interested in is how soon do they think they are from it doing something useful at the Tesla factory that is maybe um, replacing a human worker or even saving costs in some way, and then anything they can share on like how quickly do you scale up other skills. To me, the ramp of the AI brain kind of software capabilities is the much more important bottleneck in my mind than the ramp of the hardware, like a manufacturing process. They're both going to be important in due time, and I'm sure which one is more important at any given point we'll switch. But for where we are right now, I'm much more interested in, when does Optimus like actually get to the point where it's comparable with a worker, even if it's like the most simple kind of basic factory job, whatever, like the lowest hanging fruit. When does it get to the point where it's good enough to do that? That's what I'd love to know right now.
Yeah. Yep. I don't think a meaningful answer to this can exist today, and if it does, I don't expect to get it. Where are the
Yeah.
preliminary results and return on investment of your ads? Uh, I like that question. Uh, how are the ads going? I guess is the nuts of it.
Yeah, it seems to me that there's probably not a lot going on this front. I mean, they haven't really scaled up the ads in a meaningful way, to my knowledge. They've done a lot of kind of testing of internet stuff. We've seen some kind of small physical ads, like in like Tokyo Airport, I think was some of them. But by all accounts, it doesn't sound like there's going to be a Super Bowl commercial or anything like that. So I would just like to hear more about what they're thinking and what they're seeing on this. I'm guessing it's not a whole lot so far, but given the kind of continued string of price cuts that we've seen, this seems like a very pertinent question still.
Yes. Uh, so, can you speak to the economics and attach rate of auto bidder? Do you think that's something we would be able to get an answer to?
They can. I think I've done some calculations around auto bidder, and it's just small. Like I think there's a misperception among some people that like auto bidder is the FSD of Tesla Energy, where like once they get to scale and like they really figure it out, it'll be, like making it'll have the equivalent gross margin impact, let's say, of FSD on the auto side. So if FSD take rate, for example, went to 100%, it would like just drastically change the margin profile of the business. The same thing is not true of auto bidder. The margins are pretty small, even if you have a high attach rate. It's just the way that it works out is you're selling um, batteries which are extremely capital intensive. So from the customer's standpoint, you're paying a massive amount upfront, and the actual kind of average annual revenue, and maybe more to the point, margin that you're getting off of that is just going to be like a small sliver of the upfront capital cost, and you got a payback of, depending on the project, maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 7 years, something like that. And then auto bidder is a way to kind of optimize that a little bit more. So maybe you can shave off 6 months of your payback period, or something like that. So it's like a smaller revenue and margin opportunity than I think a lot of people think. And the other thing to keep in mind is that a lot of that margin actually goes to the owners of the project. It doesn't go to Tesla. So Tesla had some disclosure somewhere recently where I think it was I'm going to get this number wrong because I'm going off my memory, but it was something to the effect of cumulative. So like since inception of AutoBidder, like the margin to date, which think of that as just like the price arbitrage that AutoBidder was able to take advantage of. It was something of like, I don't know, $200 million or something like that. So just extremely small, and the majority of that almost certainly went to Tesla's customers, not to Tesla it's themselves. So it's just, I think
Yeah.
this is one that's just small. It's like a nice thing to kind of improve the functionality and the margin performance to your customers, but it's not the like this massive margin boon that I think some people think it might be.
The way I think of auto bidder is as if you've ever pulled up the graph when you're navigating to a destination and it gives you that green line that tries to predict your energy usage for this particular trip, it's pulling in weather, wind, elevation, traffic, I assume. Um, Autobidder to me does kind of the same thing where it's trying to make some predictions based on patterns and available data. Uh,
And I don't mean to downplay it because it's actually really important. And just like to give you an idea, like I've been in the control room of power plants where they literally get a phone call from the grid operator saying, "Hey, we'd like to dial you down like 20 megawatts." Like, "Oh, okay, we can do that." So like that's the level of sophistication that's going into some parts of the energy sector, is like literal phone calls to change this stuff. So you're going from that world, which is like extremely analog, not a lot of good data points being used, to one where you actually are using AI to optimize these charge and discharge decisions, which are extremely nuanced decisions. Like I really can't emphasize that enough. Like it's a perfect use case for AI, and it's not something that really can be done manually. But it's not, you're not going to be just making massive amounts of margin relative to the actual margin on the hardware side.
And again, most of that savings is realized by the customer, not by the manufacturer. Um,
Yep.
and that's and the beauty of AutoBidder is if it can shave just a little, just a percent or two here and there, it makes Megapack so much cheaper than the competition over time. I would be curious to know if you have an idea of what the hardware actually costs for a Megapack too.
I've dug into this several times. I think with the most generous assumptions, I was kind of getting in the like $200 per kilowatt hour range. It's hard to tell because a lot of it's going to depend on the ramp, and in a lot of the historical periods that we have, you had a mix of the old megapacks that were being built at Giga Nevada, and then an increasing amount of the mix of the ones that were being built more efficiently out of Lathrop. And now Lathrop's continuing to ramp. So kind of like when we saw Shanghai ramp, margin improves because you're absorbing those overhead costs a little bit more. So and then on top of that, you got the delay that we talked about earlier of like the revenue recognition. The same thing happens on the cost side. So the cost of goods sold recognition. So it's really hard to kind of strip these out in any given quarter because you've got significantly lagging costs running through there. So, but I would say it's maybe somewhere in the 200 $250 per kilowatt hour range might be about right. Um, but we'll see.
And the efficiencies are improving. When will Tesla have sufficient North American battery production to support the 7,500 for the Model 3?
Yeah, I mean, this is they could go in probably 10 different directions with this question, because one would be they want to have a lot of different sources and supply of battery, and then it's a question of how do you allocate those between the different models. Like that's a very legitimate strategy, and one downside of that strategy is that you're going to have some situations where like your base Model 3, which doesn't get the EV credit. They could also bring in the leasing component where, hey, you actually can get the $7,500 EV credit for the Model 3 if you make it a lease rather than an outright purchase. So maybe they answer it that way. But I think overall, what they'll probably say is something to the effect of, we're trying to ramp up all of our battery supply as fast as possible because we've got more uses for any batteries than we can really handle right now. Our internal demand outstrips the supply that we've got from both in-house built and external. So we're just trying to get as much as we can, and then allocate those different chemistries as optimally as we can. So, and there's going to be trade-offs in there.
And we saw announcements about 3 years ago of all these companies building new factories in the US to manufacture batteries. And a lot of them have faced technical delays. I
Yeah.
imagine Tesla was of the belief that some of those factories, the Panasonic Oklahoma factory, for example, would be online and fully ramped by now, and they're not. So this comes down to, like you said, the supply chain being the issue. And that's the benefit of having such a diversified supply chain, is if one manufacturer is facing delays, you've got other options. And it's Tesla has found it important to maintain these relationships with as many companies as they can. If you've got batteries and they're good, we will buy them. And seen people say, yeah, but LG batteries are bad because, the Bolt recall. There was a disconnect between the engineering at GM and the engineering at LG, and that caused the problem because Tesla's been using LG batteries for years and has not faced the same problems.
Well, I
Um,
think those were pouch cells too, weren't they, on the Bolt? So it's like a different
mm,
chemistry even in form factor. So there's yeah, I think a lot of people just have maybe overly simplistic views of what's going on in the battery supply chain, and it's extremely nuanced as you described, and I think it's maybe not as big of an issue as some people might make it out to be.
So we'll do one more question because we're getting kind of long here. And apologies to anyone who had their questions in and they didn't rise to the level of the sort that we're using. And then after that, we've
Also,
got,
apologies if I can interject to the people who we
please,
made fun of your question. So sorry
apologies
for
if it
those.
was, well, and it's not that sometimes some crazy questions have been answered in the past. No
Yep.
harm in asking. They will address the ones that they can. And yes, apologies if we've offended someone directly. That was not the intention. And then after this last question, we do have something exciting to announce for next summer. So stay tuned for that. Let's see what we got here. Let's make it a decent one. Could management rank the following initiatives by priority? I don't. I don't know. Okay, how about this one? Any progress made with FSD licensing agreements with another company?
I do like that question, actually. I don't think they would be capable of answering it other than saying that, yes, either conversations are still ongoing and there's nothing we can announce right now, or if they give a no like a just a sheer nope, we can't give any indication there, then that would open the door for maybe the conversations have halted, which would also be good to know. But I do like the question, and I wouldn't mind seeing that one up ranked a little bit higher.
Yes, and I think this is huge. I don't know if this would be when they would announce it. An earnings call is not the wrong time to mention something that has material impact like that. I just don't know if we would. So, guys, in the
Yeah.
comments, what did we miss and misunderstand? But our big announcement is in June, Matt and I will both be at the Michigan Owners Club Tesla event in Muskegon. And I know I said Muskegon, but they call it Muskegon for the day. It is an official, the city itself decreed it some years ago. Sure, on your big day, it's Muskegon. It's spelled the same, but you can call it what you like. And the big news that you haven't heard yet is we just had a change of venue. The parking lot that they had been using for the last 3 years, the permits quadrupled in price, and so they found an amazing deal for Heritage Park, which is where the music
Ooh,
festivals are
nice.
held, and there's a big amphitheater there, and there's plugins for all the food trucks. And if you've got a customized Tesla, you get to park on the grass where everyone can see it. And yes, even just a wrap counts as a customized Tesla. So that will be June 15th in Muskegon. Be on the lookout. More information will be forthcoming, including our guest list, which is quite impressive. We've got people from all over the world who will be in attendance and speaking and participating. Matt, thank you so much for giving me so generously of your time. I will definitely make it not a year or two before I get you back next time. And for everybody else, like, subscribe, do the usual things. Stay tuned, stay juicy, and I cannot wait to hear from you, clever robots, after the earnings drop.